So I'm at the planning stage of my research document. I've sort of decided on the form now. I think it's going to be a larger scale hot dog book that I can sort of sew together. So I made a crappy little template so that I knew where each of the pages were and what orientation they'd be in by labelling it. And then I made 3 very small scale hot dog books. I think this is A6, that have all been sewn together in Coptic stitch, which historically was a stitch that was used to sew manuscripts together, the leaves of them. So there's 3 books and a cover in this one, but I think in the final there'll be 2 covers, and it'll be a bit less messy because this is my first try with Coptic stitch, but I feel quite happy about how this turned out. So the book's going to be called Fragment, and it's an investigation of ghostliness and intangibility in autography, which is a short term for autobiographical graphic novels. Sorry, my brain's running a bit slow. So I've just been planning out the pages in this tester one by really just doodling out the relevant monoprints that I think would go into place. Because I'm sewing the 3 hot dog books together, I felt that it was relevant to split the project into 3 sections, because as I was working on it, the project changed quite a lot, and it feels appropriate that the research document is going to be reflective of that in its final form. So each one has a chapter title, so these will all be quotes taken from my essay. So the chapter title, the first one, is Placed into the Abyss, which is a quote from a critical essay about autographies that I read that ended up being really relevant to the project. So each of the pages are planned like this. They're not really, I don't think that it's very clear to other people, but I know which of the relevant monoprints goes with each of these pages, so I'm just going to flip through really quick. I've planned cut-throughs where I want bits of text or an alternative monoprint to appear in the background. I also haven't trialled it yet, but I thought it might be an interesting way to incorporate like memorabilia from the artists that I studied. So Charlotte Salmon in particular was really good for it, and I think that including one of her pieces as like a background almost intrinsic to the monoprints as they've emerged feels really relevant to the research that I've been doing. Oh, another reason that I picked the hot dog book format is because when you fold a hot dog book, a lot of the pages have these cavities in the middle because it's layered, so you can actually peel those apart, cut through, and insert things into the page in between. So this is an insert into the page of the hot dog book, and it's the same for this white section here. It's a cut through of the actual page. Anyway, so I'll continue flipping through this section. So this is Placed in the Abyss, which is about being in a sort of artistic abyss where you can't really separate yourself from your artwork, and you don't have a clear intention for what you're doing. The other thing that comes out here is I have the woman in the mirror, who is the sort of aforementioned concept that came out in my tutorial with Matt, which was sort of something that he saw as a character, but to me was a self-portrait and was emerging in a lot of my monoprints, so I thought that was really interesting. So each of the chapters ends with a reference to this woman in the mirror. So this one is one that I did when I was at home, which says I hate my hair this long, because I do, but I've been avoiding cutting it to make my mum and my family happy. So and then the next chapter title is Pained and Private Realities of Lived Existence, which is another quote from that sort of pivotal essay. So this section is a bit more comic focused because it's about day-to-day life, and some of my middle section of monoprints were really reflective of sort of autobiographical, like what I do at work, how I feel about certain things. So there's sort of just these self-portraits that these will all be monoprint. I think for this section it should have less cut-throughs because it's a bit more grounded in reality. Sort of I've not settled on it, but you can see that I did it with this page, which is a dual self-portrait of sort of me now and me when I was younger, standing in front of 2 separate mirrors. And at the moment in this insert are used stamps that unfortunately my granddad passed away on January 3rd, and these are some of the stamps from condolence letters that we received from family members, and it felt quite grounding and relevant because it's a really emotional project anyway. And it's sort of, that's why this has been a bit delayed process-wise, because we've been having a really difficult time. So as you move on, this one I've not settled on entirely, but I think I'm going to insert a dual sort of tracing paper layer here that two of my like kind of weirder layered monoprints can sit on, because it felt appropriate to have this feeling of sort of being overwhelmed. And there was a specifically really creepy monoprint that I produced that was another one of the woman in the mirror, but she was quite a scary sort of entity in that one, and yeah, that felt relevant to include at this point as well. So there's sort of, these would be a monoprint which is of me sleeping, and a monoprint of the actual reflection of the blue mirror that sits in my room, because it is a real mirror. This is a monoprint of the sort of little comic of my day-to-day life at like work, and how I feel about things and conversations people have with me, but they're all sort of like blank text bubbles, because a lot of the time you compartmentalise those aspects of your life. So another idea that I had for this, although I haven't settled on that either, was to reflect the monoprint and layer it on top of itself, or just layer it on top of itself anyway, so it feels a bit heavier and a bit more crowded in the space. Oh, the other plan for this tracing paper layout was, aside from having this sort of creepier woman in the mirror, was to have some of my original text sort of overlapping this, because it feels relevant to the idea of sort of overthinking and lingering on things in your day-to-day life. So this is the next page, which is sort of representative of having abandoned your own body. So in the most literal sense, you become a ghost of sorts, because you're viewing yourself as a stranger rather than you. So it's sort of like the you that sort of shambles around when you disassociate from day-to-day life. And then, since we've reached the end of the chapter, there is a continuation of the monoprints from the other in series, where she sort of starts to reach out of the mirror. So if you put them next to each other, goes this one, and then this one, and then the one that starts the next chapter, which is a monoprint of sort of me in the shadow of this woman who's the same silhouette as me in the mirror. And then the third chapter, which is With Dream Awakened Dies, which is a quote taken from Charlotte Salamon's Singsbreel work, which is really like about having to accept things and view the world in a new light to keep moving forward, which also felt really relevant and pivotal to this project. So the monoprints that go in here are actually some of my earlier ones being looked at and not abandoned and brought back into the project, almost as if they're a dream that you sort of have to accept along the way to producing autobiographical work. So this spread is, I've not settled on whether this will be in the same blue tone as the rest of it, or if it might be in red to make it stand out a little bit more, make it feel a bit separate, because originally these monoprints were done in red, because it was before I'd settled on this sort of woman in the blue mirror concept, so it feels sort of reflective of the process there as well. So as you flip, there would be a monoprint spread across the double page, which is sort of two versions of myself pulling at each other with sort of unwillingly linked arms, like it's the texture of the actual monoprint that I've done with this is kind of gummy here. It's like pulling away and being quite, I don't know, like a viscous action. I'm not sure if that's the right word. And then, but it's also sort of the inevitability of accepting the part of yourself that is a character and the part of yourself that's sort of the narrator, and those two bits, despite not recognising each other as the same person all the time, being intrinsic and inseparable. So this person that you addressed as a ghost and who you see in the mirror is both another and yourself, which is mates on a bin, placed in the abyss. And then here we've got the portrait of myself sort of zoomed in, and it's like an analysis, like properly looking in the mirror, instead of viewing this other woman, like looking at yourself as yourself rather than distancing from that. And then the last one is a continuation of the chapter ends for all the rest, which is finally reaching back for the woman in the mirror instead of her just reaching for you. So yeah, I'm really happy with this concept. I've got it's just a tester that I was using to lay out the book, but it already feels quite put together even though it's not polished. And so bringing this back up because it was a hot dog book, I have had to basically make my own template for printing it. So the final is going to be a size up, it's going to be A5, whereas this is A6. But I've been making the templates for printing for this. So this is the only one that I printed right now. The rest of the book is blank, but that's just because I wanted to test the scale and make sure that I had my proportions right, and that when I folded it all up, it would, after being printed on an A4 sheet of paper, still be in the correct orientation in the book and on the correct page, which it was, so I'm quite happy with that. And this one was actually originally red, but I might, because this is from the dream section, I might change it back to red, but I'm not sure because I'm kind of enjoying it in this blue. And also, since the monoprints all have backgrounds when they were scanned, I was a bit worried that that would show up on the paper, but it's only really visible in person, and it's like this slight this slightly warm tint that contrasts the blue, and I kind of like it. So I'm just hoping that when they're all sort of put next to each other at the moment, that that'll sort of blend together, and when I'm cutting and pasting elements, I can sort of disguise that by picking up the background from another piece and slotting it over the top, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I'm really happy with this so far. I like the way of inserting memorabilia, and it's all just in the polishing it and putting it together and printing it and sewing it, so rather a lot, but I'm quite, this feels like something, whereas for a long time I felt very adrift about this project, so I'm very happy with this.